I never imagined that I'd be wearing a wedding dress and not able to feel happy. I was standing in front of the mirror, adjusting my veil with trembling hands, my face pale like it wasn't even mine. My mom was behind me, looking at me with a faint smile and saying, "Be patient, Leanne. Life gives opportunities, and this marriage is one to save you and save us." I couldn't respond. All I knew was that I was going to marry a man I knew nothing about, except that he was rich. His name was Raid Kilani, and he had been injured in an accident that left him disabled. The marriage was a deal to save our house from debts after my father's death. I stepped out of the room with heavy steps, and everyone was clapping as if they were watching a love story, not a deal written with sorrow. When I saw him for the first time, he was sitting in a wheelchair wearing a gray suit. His face was handsome, but his eyes were cold, stiff, as if they didn't know warmth. He didn't extend his hand, he just said calmly, "Hello, Leanne." I replied in a quiet voice, "Hello." The wedding went by in silence, and I returned with him to the mansion that had become my new home. The place was luxurious, but intimidating. The servants walked quietly, no sound, no laughter. I felt strange among walls that didn't seem to know mercy. On my first day, I saw a stylish woman standing by the staircase, her sharp features scanning me from head to toe. She extended her hand with a cold smile and said, "I'm Hind, Raid's stepmother." I hesitated for a moment and said, "Nice to meet you." She replied coldly, looking at me steadily, "I hope you'll be a blessing to him, not a burden." From that moment, I knew she didn't like me, nor did she care for him. Every time she passed by, she would speak softly to the servants and glare at me as if she was watching me. As for Raid, he was like a shadow, spending his time in his office, the door always closed. I didn't know if I wanted him to talk to me or just remain silent. A week passed, and I lived like a guest, not a wife. I could hear the wheelchair moving at night, and sometimes his soft voice talking to himself. I tried to convince myself I had accepted the deal with my mind, but my heart wasn't at ease. One rainy night, I stood on the balcony watching the rain. I heard the sound of his door opening. I turned quickly and saw him coming out of the office toward his room. The wheelchair creaked softly, and my steps raced ahead of my mind as I asked, "Are you tired?" He replied in a cold tone, "No, just need some rest." I said, "If you want, I can help." He paused, looking at me strangely, a mix of fear and pain in his gaze. He said, "No need. I'm used to handling things on my own." He turned, but the wheelchair tipped over suddenly. I screamed and ran to him, trying to stop him, but we fell together. A moment of pain, fear, and the sound of impact, then silence. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in his arms, and his legs were moving. I froze. My voice caught. You can walk?" He looked at me steadily, lifted me off the floor, and stood in front of me, upright, steady, on his feet. My heart raced like a crazy, and I stammered, "You were pretending? Why?" He laughed, a small laugh full of pain more than mockery, and said, "People like to pity, but they don't stick around. After the accident, I decided everyone should believe I wouldn't stand again. I was looking for something that money can't buy, true attention." Tears fell, and I said, "So our marriage was a test? You were testing me?" He said calmly, "Your mom offered the deal, not me. I agreed because I wanted to know if someone would see me as a human, not a bank account." We were silent. The rain was the only sound between us. Finally, I said, "But you lied to me." He whispered, "I lied to survive. If they found out I could walk, they would kill me." His voice shook me. I asked in disbelief, "Who?" He sat on the wheelchair and said softly, "My stepmother and her son. Since my father died, they've been after the inheritance. If they find out I can stand, everything ends." From that night, a secret existed between us. I no longer saw him as a stranger. I felt he was trapped in fear just like me. I started helping him from afar, leaving food at his door, covering for him while he practiced walking at night. I saw him once standing under the rain, walking slowly on the grass, like a child learning to walk again. I looked away as if I didn't see, but my heart raced. But the silence remained. One day, as I passed by his office, I overheard Hind on the phone, her soft voice dripping with poison. Make sure the medical report stays as it is. No one must know he's walking. Understand? If they find out, we'll lose the insurance and the inheritance. I froze. I returned to my room, my heart pounding, wrote a small note and slipped it under his pillow. If you trust me, don't go home tomorrow. Something bad is being planned. The next day, he said he had an urgent business trip, and that night, the mansion caught fire. Smoke, screams, the servants running, and I froze in place. If he had been in his room, it would have been over. Later, the police confirmed the fire was arson, and they arrested Hind and her son. 2 days later, he stood at my door, upright, calm for the first time, and smiled faintly. So you knew. I smiled through my tears. I was worried about you. He approached and gently touched my hand and said, "Everyone used me, except you." I said, "Maybe because we broke together." He laughed and said, "Maybe indeed." A year later, on the beach in Aqaba, the second wedding took place, but this time for love, for choice. No wheelchairs, no deal papers. I laughed and my mom cried with joy. The salty air, the clear sky. And I knew I hadn't just married a man, I'd started a new life from the ashes. Sometimes falling isn't the end, it's the beginning of a story worth telling.